Punctuation saves lives. So does context. Do you know that you can read in the Bible, "There is no God"? However, when read in its context, here's what the Bible actually does say. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God." Psalm 14, verse 1. In being equipped for ministry, it is rightly and repeatedly hammered home to prospective preachers and needs to still be remembered by those more experienced. A text without a context is a pretext. A text without a context is a pretext. It is context that sets boundary, direction, even definition to a word, phrase, or statement. It can make all the difference in the world to the welfare of either grandma being lunch or getting to eat lunch, or whether or not the Bible declares there is no God. Context is the vital link to confirmed truth and the disastrous missing link, singular, to heresy. How the West was won is an epic tale. How the text was conned is a tragedy. From politics to the news and advertising media, we see it every day as we live in a generation of soundbite, spin, tagline, attention grabber, fake news. Such is now to be expected from the world around us. But in the church, which amongst other things the Apostle Paul describes as being the pillar and foundation of the truth, 1 Timothy 3 verse 15. Time and again my heart sinks when I hear preacher after preacher say in reference to the Bible-based sermon at hand, "To save time, we'll not read the whole passage. Now, we don't have time to read the entire chapter we're going to study, so I'll just paraphrase it. Please, to whom it may concern, as one preacher to another, make time for the public and full reading of the Scriptures in regard to the message or study of the hour. The reading of Scripture, and not the preaching of it, are the only infallible words our congregations will ever hear from our lips. Is it not more important that the Bible be allowed to speak for itself, even more so than our speaking of it, for it, from it? The Bible is its own context, and thus will never contradict or confuse, but when given room to speak and be heard, will never lead to error. Please consider some specifics with me. Was the text not conned when hymnology was diluted? The great anthems of the church, hymns, were written to tell the story of God, especially in the days of the Wesleys, where a major concern was how to teach the faith to people who mostly could neither read nor write. Hymns became a vital vehicle to inform and inspire. In both length and content, we have largely ditched our great song heritage in favour of shortened versions which can rob of flow and detract from meaning to the thinking worshipper, and unscriptural lyrics which are mindless, repetitive, shallow, worldly, and oftentimes just plain nonsense. The result is more than just this generation of Christ ones who are now biblically ignorant and illiterate. Over the years, as new songbooks have come out and standard traditional greats have had verses omitted or reordered, I have often asked myself by what criteria, even context, these measures were taken. These days, for many, the definition of a relevant church is how many new songs they sing. We have become broader at the expense of going deeper. Here's another observation to consider. Was the text not conned when theology was doctored? What I mean is the amount of popular scripture verses, even popularized biblical promises, appearing below calendars, on mugs and keychains, and endlessly quoted, which are in truth misquoted because they are claimed without condition or explanation, that is, with no context. Some examples. Psalm 37 verse 4, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." While this verse is quoted in full, many no less misapply it as a blank check for God to give whatever is desired. That is not the promise here. That which we desire is surely that which we delight in. This is not an unconditional promise that God will give us everything and anything we desire, but that when God is our delight, our desire for him will be more than satisfied in the giving to us not of stuff, but of God himself. Here's another, Philippians 3 verse 10. "I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death." How many quote and want the first part, knowing Christ and the power of his resurrection, but not the latter part of the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death? However, the Greek construction of this verse presents the entire verse as a complete whole, the one idea, unable to be separated. Please hear it. Good Bible teaching needs to bring this and other like truths out plainly, practically, and fully. One more example. Jeremiah 29 and verse 11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." In my experience, this is the biggest victim of abuse, where this one verse, Jeremiah 29 verse 11, with no context, is frequently, readily, and easily offered to any and all, no matter the condition of soul, as God's promise for every one, every time, in every situation. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 not only needs to be taken in the wider context of a historical letter to Jews in exile, but also in the immediate context of the verses which follow. Jeremiah 12 through 14. "Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you." In proper context, the baseless presumption of many is removed, and with it, the disappointment of unfulfilled and disappointed expectation, not to mention putting words which God spoke in his mouth in a way he never spoke them. Which brings us on to one more observation. Was the text not conned when heresy was dignified? The kings and queens of the pretext, which results from a text with no context, have to be the false faith teachers, even fake teachers, who are no less accepted by the mainstream church. Have you noticed they never preach systematically in verse-by-verse exegesis and exposition through a passage, but they lead you on a quick fire, bewildering, dizzying jump around the scriptures from one isolated out of context verse to another. Yet far from being confronted and rejected until they will be corrected, their hired hand bungling of the scriptures is quietly ignored as Christian bookstores prominently place and sell their resources, Christian radio and television broadcast and award their programs, and sound Bible teachers guest and genuflect on their ministry networks, thus bringing to these wolves in sheep's clothing an identity, dignity, validity, and legitimacy they do not deserve, but should be denied. This needs to serve as a warning and wake up to us all. Please hear it. Sound biblical truth and its trusted teachers should not only be measured by what is said and what is not said, but also, and just as crucially, by what and who is endorsed, sponsored, and partnered with. Let me close with these words from 2 John, verses 7 through 11. There are a lot of smooth-talking charlatans loose in the world who refuse to believe that Jesus Christ was truly human, a flesh and blood human being. Give them their true title, deceiver, antichrist, and be very careful around them so you don't lose out on what we've worked so diligently in together. I want you to get every reward you have coming to you. Anyone who gets so progressive in his thinking that he walks out on the teaching of Christ walks out on God. But whoever stays with the teaching stays faithful to both the Father and the Son. If anyone shows up who doesn't hold to this teaching, don't invite him in and give him the run of the place. That would just give him a platform to perpetuate his evil ways, making you his partner. I say again, sound biblical truth and its trusted teachers should not only be measured by what is said and what is not said, but also, and just as crucially, by who and what is endorsed, sponsored, and partnered with. Selah, consider these things.